Her son drained her retirement fund, then took her to a motel and drove off. Marilyn Ford, former accountant and grandmother of 3, didn't chase the SUV. Caleb thought she'd wait. Tessa thought she'd forgive. By nightfall, their names were erased from every account she once shared. She'd signed their loan papers, their LLC filings, their vacation bills. Now she was signing them out of her future, one notarized document at a time. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The van door slid shut with a hollow thunk, louder than it needed to be. Marilyn's canvas tote still sat at her feet, half-zipped, her paperback curling at the edge, reading glasses tucked inside like a forgotten truth. Gravel crunched as the family's shadows stretched across the motel parking lot, distorted in the late afternoon sun. Caleb leaned into the open window, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll love it here, Ma. Peace and all that. Plus you said your back was stiff." He didn't wait for her reply. He was already pulling his sunglasses down. Tessa gave a quick wave from the passenger seat. "We'll swing back around after the canyon. Enjoy the quiet." The van pulled away, slow at first, then fast enough to kick dust onto the faded motel sign behind her. Marilyn didn't wave. She stood still, her spine straight, watching the SUV she'd purchased round the corner and disappear with the laughter of her grandchildren muffled behind tinted windows. She blinked once, twice, then she picked up the tote and turned toward the front office. The bell above the door jingled, cheerfully indifferent. Behind the desk, Ed glanced up from a yellowed newspaper, weathered, buzz-cut, and calm as a ranch morning. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, not unkindly. Marilyn stepped up to the counter, resting her tote gently on the laminate. "I just got promoted," she said, voice even. "From funding to forgetting." Ed raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and slid the room key across the counter, old-school brass tag and all. Room 12. Outside, the sun flared gold off the red rocks in the distance. Tourists angled for selfies. Somewhere, a hawk screamed overhead. Inside, room 12 was simple. Twin beds with dusty rose quilts, a desk with chipped varnish, a sunbeam slicing diagonally across the carpet. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and thyme. Marilyn ran a hand along the windowsill, feeling the grit, the heat, the silence. She sat on the edge of the bed, ankles together, hands resting lightly on her knees. In the distance, tires squealed, then faded. The motel's Wi-Fi password was taped to the side of the TV in blocky black Sharpie. She didn't reach for it, not yet. Instead, she opened the tote, pulled out her travel binder, thick, zippered, slightly worn at the corners. Her fingers brushed across the tabs, like touching old piano keys. Behind her, a knock at the door. Ed stood there with a small bottle of water and a folded motel map. "Just so you know," he said. "No one's booked next door for the week. Should be nice and quiet." Marilyn accepted the water. "That's thoughtful of you." He nodded. "Holler if you need anything." She closed the door softly, then locked it. Back on the bed, she unzipped the binder fully. Pages of notes, receipts, bank statements. She flipped through them slowly, methodically. The numbers didn't lie. They never Outside, a child laughed, a sound from another family, another story, not hers. She looked down at a highlighted transfer, $2,400. Caleb Tessa, school trip fund. Her pen stroke underneath it had been shaky, too soft. She pressed her fingers to the page. A shadow moved across the blinds. Her phone vibrated. One buzz. She didn't look. Instead, Marilyn picked up the motel pen, clicked it once, and began writing on the back of a Red Rock State Park brochure. She wrote slowly, clearly, deliberately. A list of names, but only 3 got checkmarks. Outside, the SUV didn't return, and Marilyn didn't expect it to. The motel room had settled into its own silence, the kind that thickened after sunset, when the wind stilled and voices from neighboring units turned to television static. The Red Rock cliffs outside had gone dark and regal, their fire dimmed to silhouette. Marilyn sat cross-legged on the motel bed now, her tote beside her, the travel binder open in her lap like a confession too long delayed. The first page bore her own handwriting. Blue ink, fine point, neat and restrained. Loan log, Caleb and Tessa Ford. Start date, April 15, 2017. She flipped through, page after page, highlighted transfers, check numbers, notations like temporary float, bridge to payroll, and child care offset. No formal agreements, just faith. The currency mothers traded in, $84,613. Quietly gone, her pen hovered over the last entry. March of this year, $1,800. April business inventory. She remembered the call. Tessa, in the background, saying something about an opportunity window. Caleb's tone, urgent, grateful, familiar. The performance had been flawless. But the curtain had dropped the moment the SUV rounded the bend this afternoon, and didn't come back. She tapped the page once, then twice. A private gavel. From a zippered sleeve in the binder's back, she pulled out an old printout. The email subject line read, "We'll pay you back. Promise." She didn't need to open it to remember what it said. She read it anyway. "Once the business scales, we'll start payments. You have our word. Just give us this last push. It'll be different this time." It wasn't. Marilyn reached across the bed for her laptop, a compact dented Lenovo with a floral sticker peeling from one corner. She powered it on, entered her credentials, and waited for the two-factor ping on her phone. A few clicks later, the family trust account loaded, its interface blue and sterile. 3 authorized users: Marilyn Ford, Caleb Ford, Tessa Ford. She hovered over the access controls. "Are you sure you want to update permissions?" "Yes," she whispered to no one. She removed Caleb, then Tessa. Another window prompted her for a new passcode phrase. She typed it slowly. "Quiet is earned. Trust is not owed." The green check mark glowed on screen. Marilyn exhaled through her nose. Not relief, not regret. Something colder, steadier. She reached for her phone next, and found Judith's number in her contacts. It was labeled simply, "Attorney." The phone rang twice. Judith's voice came on, clipped and calm. "Marilyn, I'm ready," Marilyn said. "Let's untangle this web." A beat of silence. "Then I'll start the paperwork first thing in the morning." Marilyn ended the call, without pleasantries. Judith didn't need them. Their relationship had always been functional, efficient, trustworthy. The phone buzzed almost immediately after. A text this time. "Molly, Grandma, where are you?" Marilyn smiled faintly, not out of joy but recognition. Molly always noticed the things no one else did. The absence of a plate, a pause in a sentence, an unpaid smile. She replied, "Resting." No emoji, no explanation. She put the phone down face first and returned her eyes to the binder. Behind one final sleeve was a folded brochure from the local bank branch back in Phoenix, the one she'd never needed before. It advertised senior private accounts, personal only, non-transferable. Her thumb hovered over the corner of it, pressing lightly. Outside, a coyote yipped, far off, a lone call in the dark. The sun was already sharp over the ridgeline when Marilyn stepped back into the front office. Her blouse was crisp, pale blue, ironed with motel steam, if not motel care. She carried her binder tucked under one arm and a sealed white envelope in the other. Ed looked up from behind the counter, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, ma'am." She placed the envelope on the counter, slid it forward without ceremony. 5 more nights. Cash. Ed didn't touch it right away. "You sure? I'm not here by accident," she said, "and I'm not leaving early." He gave her a slow, respectful nod and reached under the desk for a different set of keys. "I'll move you down to room 5. It's quieter. Gets the sunrise." He hesitated. "It's usually for folks looking to think, or forget." "I'll take the view," Marilyn said. 15 minutes later, she stood in the doorway of her upgraded room, slightly larger, freshly vacuumed windows facing east. A single yellow rose sat in a chipped glass on the dresser. Ed's idea, clearly. She set her binder down, walked to the window, watched the first rays push across the landscape like ink across old parchment. Then she opened the drawer, pulled out Motel stationery, and began to write. Her handwriting was deliberate, measured. The first note was for Molly, soft, unflinching, hopeful. A line about always seeing more than she said. A reminder that sometimes love means walking away before you're shoved. The second was for Lena, her younger granddaughter, shorter, gentler. A story from when she was 5 and cried over a bird that hit a window. Marilyn had never forgotten. The third was for Jack, the youngest, mostly pictures. She doodled a crooked sun and a smiling lion, and signed it "Roar" louder than they expect you to. There was no fourth letter. She capped the pen. No apology, just absence, the kind that explains itself. Her phone rang. Tessa. She watched the screen light up with her name, the photo still attached from years ago. Tessa, in a Christmas sweater Marilyn had paid for, laughing into a cup of cider. The ringtone faded, it lit up again. Same number. Marilyn powered the phone off. Then she opened her laptop and logged into her hotel rewards account. 4 reservations under her name, all booked by Caleb last month. Using her points, she clicked cancel one by one. Sedona, Page, Flagstaff, Vegas. Each vanished like air out of a tire. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. Behind her a soft knock. Ed again, holding a paper menu from the diner across the road. They updated it. Figured you might want options. Appreciate it. You sure you're okay? He asked. Eyes kind but not probing. Marilyn studied him for a second, then gave the faintest nod. I'm not unraveling, Ed. I'm editing. He gave a small grin and left without another word. She returned to the bed, opened a private message thread with Judith and typed, "Pull the trigger on the freeze. No delays." Judith's reply came within a minute. Already in motion. Joint family credit lines will be inaccessible by tomorrow morning. Marilyn didn't reply. She didn't need to. Outside, the hum of tires passed on the highway. Then silence. She laid the 3 letters on the nightstand, weighed down with a Motel Bible. Then she made a list, not of names this time, but tasks. At the top, new P.O. box, new legal address, new will. Each was a door being closed, but not locked, just no longer left open for people who forgot who built the house. The call came mid-morning, sharp, tinny, insistent. Marilyn had powered her phone back on only moments earlier to check the sunrise against her motel calendar. She hadn't expected the signal to catch so quickly, but it did. Caleb's name lit up the screen, pulsing like an overdue alarm. She stared at it for a full ring cycle before answering. What the hell, Mom? No greeting, no pause, just heat. You froze the card? I was at the gas station with the kids. Do you have any idea? Marilyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't even stand. You said I love alone time, she said. So I'm taking it. There was a pause. Not silence. Just the sound of him trying to process a conversation he hadn't imagined she'd ever initiate, let alone control. You're being irrational, he hissed. We have plans. You're sabotaging your own family. No, she said, evenly. I'm just finally reading the receipts. She hung up before he could reply. A moment later, a new number buzzed in. Unniniaun. This is financial abuse. You're hurting your grandchildren to punish us. Tess, always shifting the focus, always claiming the higher ground after shoving others off it. Marilyn stared at the message, the edges of her mouth tight but unmoved. She took a screenshot, opened her email app, forwarded it to Judith with a subject line that read simply, "Another log for the fire." She turned her phone over and slid it back into the drawer. Outside, the day was warm but bearable. The motel courtyard, framed by a low stucco wall and a few mismatched patio tables, was still a hummingbird, zipped past the rosemary shrub. Marilyn took her coffee outside, careful not to spill. Ed was already out there, wiping down a sun-faded table under the umbrella. He looked up. "Hope you're hungry. I got the diner to send over the French toast special." No raisins. She gave a faint smile. Thoughtful. On the house, he said, then added, respectfully. Marilyn sat, unfolding her cloth napkin across her lap. You're not subtle, Ed, he shrugged. A Marine doesn't have to be this. The plate was warm, fragrant with cinnamon and butter, the kind of thing you didn't cook for yourself. She ate slowly, carefully, chewing not just this food, but the quiet. Her thoughts weren't racing. They didn't need to anymore. She looked around the courtyard, cracked tiles, humming AC units, a faint sound of someone coughing from room 7. She didn't miss the resort breakfasts, the polished silence of vacation homes. She missed nothing. Her phone, still inside, buzzed again. She didn't check it. She had coffee in hand. The sun was inching over the edge of the umbrella. There was nowhere else she needed to be. A red truck pulled into the lot. Not flashy, just dependable. Ed glanced toward it, then back to her. Courier comes today, he said. Want me to hold your name off the mailbox? Please. They drank in silence for another minute before Ed stood. You know, he said, brushing crumbs from the table, you handle this like someone who's done it before. I haven't, but I've watched it happen to people who didn't. She stayed at the table after he went back inside. The French toast was gone. The coffee was half cold. She watched an ant cross the table, step around a smear of syrup, and keep going. The motel printer whirred softly, its inkhead jerking left and right, spitting out a crisp 4-page revocation form. Marilyn stood over it, arms crossed, reading the first page as it fed through. Dissolution of shared family trust, irrevocable clause invoked. Judith had prepped the document at sunrise. Marilyn had reviewed every line before breakfast. Now she was printing the end of a system her son had treated like a birthright, a system she had built. She signed the final page in black ink, steady hand, no hesitation. Room 5 had become a command post. The binder still open on the desk, laptop balanced beside it, an envelope of bank forms at her elbow. The room's decor hadn't changed, but its energy had. It no longer felt like exile. It felt like headquarters. She logged into the senior private account portal, the one she'd pre-qualified for 6 months earlier and never activated, just in case. She'd almost convinced herself it was paranoid at the time, but she'd clicked continue anyway. Now she hit transfer all remaining assets from the trust account, her retirement buffer, her liquid cash, the emergency reserves she'd been too generous to ring-fence, slid out of shared access like sand through glass. When the confirmation screen blinked green, she sat back in the chair and folded her hands in her lap. Outside, a lawn crew fired up a weed trimmer. It buzzed against the stucco like a mosquito trapped in glass. She didn't flinch. Next, she opened the client dashboard for her financial advisor's office. The same man Caleb had called our guy at Thanksgiving last year while explaining a bridge loan he needed for expansion. Her name still authorized access for him, just as she'd expected. She scrolled to the settings, revoked it, then called the office. The receptionist greeted her cheerily until Marilyn's voice hardened just slightly. No further communications with Caleb Ford, effective immediately. Any attempt to restore access will result in formal complaint filings. You'll receive an email shortly confirming new custody protocol. She hung up before the woman could stammer a reply. The laptop chimed with a new message. Judith, right to revoke letter filed. Language includes coercive lending, breach of familial fiduciary trust, and asset misuse. You are protected. Marilyn read the line again. You are protected, and closed her laptop with both hands. She took a moment, not to exhale, but to sit with the stillness. Then she opened a separate browser tab. A rural women's college in northern Arizona, one she'd admired years ago for their housing program that prioritized survivors of financial entrapment. She had bookmarked the donation page and never visited it again. Until now, $10,000. She didn't split it, didn't hedge, just clicked donate in full. When the receipt appeared on screen, she smiled, just barely, and printed that too. She pinned it to the motel bulletin board above the coffee machine. As she stood up, her phone buzzed on the dresser. Molly, Grandma, what happened? They're freaking out. Marilyn picked up the phone, stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. She didn't answer right away. Not yet. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the red rock wall across the highway. Ancient, layered, unmoved by time or tantrum. They had hollowed her out year by year, not with cruelty, but with need. Always asking, always assuming she'd bend just a bit more. But this morning, Marilyn had broken something far more lasting than silence. Marilyn sat on the edge of the motel bed, glasses perched low, laptop balanced on her thighs. A single lamp lit the room now, casting long shadows on the bulletin board above the desk, where the $10,000 donation receipt still hung like a quiet declaration. She scrolled through years of messages, Tessa's texts, effusive when asking for money, clipped when thanking her, and cold when denied. Caleb's emails, subject lines like small ask, family first, urgent, need quick help. She dragged and dropped each one into a folder she'd just created. Exhibits, personal pressure. Every holiday card where they'd thanked her for all you do but signed only their names. Every tagged photo on social media, where the caption read, Ford family road trip. No mention of who had booked the cabin, paid the deposit, or filled the fridge. Not that she wanted credit, she just wasn't going to let the absence of truth become its own narrative. A text buzzed from Judith, starting preliminary file, potential defamation, family financial exploitation, private client review only. If they push, we push. Marilyn replied simply, good, don't blink. She moved next to her digital estate file. Years ago, she'd set up the basics of her will through a prepaid attorney service. Now, with Judith overseeing the revisions, she opened the active draft. Caleb's name used to appear 6 times, in 3 clauses. Now, 0. She deleted the last lingering reference to his business continuity support clause, then moved to the health proxy section. For decades, that role had belonged to him by default, one signature among other dusty assumptions. She clicked Assign New Proxy and typed Molly J. Ford. There was no hesitation. Molly had never asked for anything except time. She was the only one who ever listened with her eyes. A soft knock at the door broke the rhythm. Marilyn set the laptop aside and opened it to find Ed holding a brown paper laundry bag and a mesh basket of folded towels. You want me to get your clothes laundered? He asked. Marilyn glanced at the khakis draped over the desk chair, beige, shapeless, symbols of every family trip she'd dressed for, smiling as if she hadn't funded the whole thing. She looked back at Ed. No, burn the khaki. He blinked, then chuckled. Copy that. She handed him a 20 anyway, then pulled 3 folded hundreds from a notebook on the nightstand. She tucked one under her pillow and placed the other 2 in envelopes marked with room numbers, 7 and 8. The cleaning staff had been discreet, respectful. The little things that didn't go unnoticed by people who once mattered and now didn't. She grabbed the motel pen and added a sticky note to the bills. To the people who clean up after others, thank you for not expecting me to apologize for that too. Ed returned as she was sliding the last envelope into place. He stood in the doorway, tipping his chin toward the folder on the desk. That your plan? Marilyn didn't look up. It's not a plan anymore, Ed. It's policy. The motel room was silent except for the faint, rhythmic clicking of Marilyn's trackpad. The Arizona afternoon was dry and golden, sun slicing clean across the floor like a scalpel. She was halfway through her second cup of coffee, her jaw set, as the Secretary of State website finished loading. Search. Caleb Ford LLC. She expected something small. Maybe under his and Tessa's names. Maybe buried under an umbrella account. She didn't expect what popped up. Primary business contact. Marilyn Ford. Registered agent Marilyn Ford. Articles of incorporation, digitally signed M. Ford. Date filed, February 14, Valentine's Day. She hadn't signed a thing. Not knowingly, somewhere along the line, Caleb had submitted one of her e-signatures from a family tax doc and attached it to a business filing. She stared at the timestamp, 3:11 p.m. She remembered it now. That was the day Molly had asked to go on a walk with her. Marilyn had been on the porch, distracted, watching Lena ride a bike down the long cul-de-sac. He'd filed it then. She took a screenshot, another, sent both to Judith. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. Judith, we can revoke the registration based on false authorization and fraudulent agency. We'll also initiate asset recovery if any accounts were opened under your SSN. Want me to move now? Marilyn didn't even hesitate. Yes, torch it. She sat back in the motel chair, her spine stiff. There was no drama to this, no emotion, only clarity. A new message popped in, from Molly. Molly, did you know they've been telling people you're showing signs of dementia? Marilyn's fingers hovered over the phone. Molly, they're friends at church. Dad said you can't handle money anymore, that it's for your own good. Marilyn read the texts twice. Her hands didn't tremble, not even a blink. She stood and walked to the mirror. There were lines, of course there were lines, but her gaze was steady, her face sharp. The kind of sharp you earn when you've spent a life cushioning everyone else's crash landings. She spoke aloud, not to herself, but to the world that might one day ask. We'll make sure they remember the truth. There was a knock at the door. Ed stood outside with car keys in hand. Up for a little drive? She didn't ask where, just nodded and grabbed her jacket. They drove in silence. The old pickup rattled slightly, but ran smooth. The road curved upward, climbing toward the high desert cliffs that overlook the canyon basin. No tourists here, just sandstone and wind and sky. At the top, Ed cut the engine and let the quiet take over. They sat there, side by side, two people used to being looked through, not at. After a while, Ed spoke. My mother gave until there was nothing left. I watched her do it, swore I wouldn't let it happen to someone else on my watch. Marilyn looked out over the edge. I'm not someone else. I know, he said. That's why I brought you here. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and let the breeze thread through her hair. Her phone rang again, this time, not Caleb, not Molly, not Judith. Caller ID Vivian R. Brooks. An old name, an older friend. They hadn't spoken in years. Marilyn answered. Vivian? A pause, then the voice worn, familiar. I heard what they did. Marilyn waited. You good? Vivian asked, voice thin but steady. Marilyn glanced over the overlook, the sun warming her knuckles where they rested against the doorframe. No, she said, but I'm better. The desk lamp clicked on at dawn. Marilyn sat dressed, her blouse pressed and buttoned to the collar, a leather-bound notebook open in front of her, her pen moving slowly, no longer for lists, but for parting. On the page, a handwritten letter, no salutation, just clarity. You taught me distance, I learned. You called it responsibility. I see it now for what it was. The silence I gave you for years wasn't weakness. It was credit. It ran out. She didn't sign it, Mom. She didn't sign it at all. She folded the letter in thirds, slid it into a plain white envelope, and addressed it to Caleb Ford. No return, only a zip code underlined once. Then she opened her laptop. Rental car. Booked under her maiden name, Marilyn R. Grafton. She hadn't used it in decades, but the moment she typed it, something small and dormant shifted inside her, like a locked drawer cracking open. Pickup, 11 a.m. One-way rental, unlimited miles. She logged into the postal system next, and reserved a new P.O. box in Flagstaff, under the same name. She selected business mail forwarding, just in case. Not because she planned to run a business, because she'd been one for too long. Outside, the sun crept higher, bleaching the horizon pale gold. She walked to her suitcase, opened the jewelry pouch that hadn't seen daylight since her husband's funeral, and lifted out the one piece she'd never parted with, her wedding ring. She rolled it in her palm for a long moment. It was still warm from her skin, as if holding the memory of all the years it had stayed out of sight. Down the street, the women's shelter thrift shop had just opened. She arrived 15 minutes later and handed the ring over to the director. Put it toward the housing auction, Marilyn said. The woman blinked. Are you sure? No one left to wear it. Marilyn replied. Might as well help someone start over. By the time she returned to the motel, her room was stripped bare. Bed made. Binder packed. The only thing left on the nightstand was a folded envelope addressed Ed Harmon. She placed it in the office mailbox herself. Inside, 500 in cash and a note written in her firmest hand. You gave me dignity when no one else noticed mine was gone. Thank you for not asking questions that weren't yours to carry. She didn't wait for him to find it. She wheeled her suitcase quietly to the front office, checked out without fanfare, signed nothing but the receipt. As she turned to leave, Ed stepped in through the side entrance, wind-blown and flushed. You sure this is it? He asked, like he already knew the answer. She gave a small nod. I don't want roots anymore, Ed. I want options. He looked down, swallowed hard, then reached out and shook her hand. Firm, like someone letting go with respect, not regret. I'll keep the porch light off, he said. Figured you'd prefer that. I will. She walked outside, head high, the warmth of the Arizona sun brushing her collarbones like a benediction. The rental was parked by the curb. She opened the trunk, stowed her suitcase, climbed in. No playlist, no GPS, just the road. She didn't look back at the motel. Didn't need to. The motel room was spotless. Not just clean emptied, bed tucked tight, wastebasket bone dry, no coffee cups, no luggage tags, no hair left on the pillow, just an envelope on the counter. Now open, the note inside already read twice by Ed Harmon. He stood behind the front desk, hands folded over it, when the door banged open. Caleb, his face was red from the heat, or fury or both. Tessa wasn't with him. He stalked toward the desk like a man arriving for a confrontation he assumed he'd win by volume. Where is she? Ed didn't answer. Just turned the envelope over once, then folded it shut. Caleb planted both hands on the counter. She's 74. She doesn't just disappear. She didn't disappear, Ed said evenly. She checked out. Caleb laughed, but it cracked in the middle. You don't understand. We're her family. Ed looked up, eyes steady, weathered, tired in the kind of way that doesn't get fixed with sleep. That used to mean something. Caleb blinked. We were worried. She's been off. She's not herself. No, Ed said, nodding once. She's not. She's better. Caleb's jaw twitched. You're obstructing something. If she's in danger, she left under her own name, Ed said, with her own money, on her own timeline. That's not danger. That's freedom. Caleb slammed a hand down once, flat and loud, and then turned to storm out, muttering something about legal action and elder fraud. Ed didn't flinch. He just pulled the motel ledger close and turned the page. 2 counties away, Marilyn sat by a window framed with velvet drapes. The senior lodge was discreet, private and pleasant, not luxurious but quiet. Her room overlooked a native cactus garden. Hummingbirds visited the blooms like clockwork. Everything about it felt temporary, and that's exactly how she wanted it. A binder sat on her lap, not financial this time, a journal, unlined. Its first page was clean except for one handwritten title, How I Paid for My Own Erasure. She didn't write that line for sympathy. She wrote it as a warning. Across the room, the television flickered with muted local news. A stock photo of Caleb appeared on screen beside the words, Local Business Faces Legal Filing Over Unverified Ownership. A slow scroll beneath the anchor read, Ford Solutions LLC placed under compliance audit, following anonymous documentation. Judith had worked fast. Marilyn turned the TV off with the remote and didn't bother watching the rest. A knock at the door. The director of the lodge peeked in. We've filed the paperwork you asked for, Ms. Grafton. You're now listed as a legally protected senior resident under Arizona's Adult Safeguarding Code. Marilyn nodded. Thank you. No visitors unless you clear them. Good. When the door closed again, she leaned back in her chair and opened her journal to the next blank page. She didn't start writing just yet. She just sat with it. Then, her phone buzzed once on the windowsill. Molly. A photo message. She opened it. A sketch done in pencil and ink, rough and brilliant. It was a portrait of Marilyn, armor-clad, not knightly, modern, powerful. One hand resting on a cane, the other holding a paper labeled Truth. Her face wasn't angry. It was certain. Below it, Molly had written, If they don't see who you are now, it's because they never looked in the first place. Marilyn smiled, not wistfully, sharply. She folded the sketch and slipped it between the first pages of the memoir. By noon, her room smelled like lemon polish and ink. Marilyn had spent the morning on hold, not anxious, just patient. One hand cradled the phone while the other clicked through tabs, accounts, authorizations, signatures. Each call had the same script. Close the account, remove all co-signers, mail nothing, email nothing. The reps confirmed details she already knew by heart. Her voice was calm, unfaltering. The hold music didn't rattle her. By 12:17, there were no more joint anything. No auto pays, no backup lines, no emergency contacts with her name beside theirs. She didn't pause to celebrate. Instead, she printed the last page from her lodge's community office printer, a notarized statement, professionally worded by Judith, stamped clean and blue at the bottom. R.E. misrepresentation of dependent status, Marilyn R. Grafton. She folded it neatly, placed it in a heavyweight envelope, and addressed it to Human Resources, Metrotech Creative Agency, Caleb's employer. It would arrive by Monday. They would learn their senior accounts manager had fraudulently reported his mother as a dependent on multiple benefits forms. She slipped the envelope into the outgoing mail bin without a word. Back in her room, the phone buzzed on the side table. Tessa. Again, she hadn't heard from her since the last round of veiled apologies and backhanded concern. Marilyn debated not even unlocking the screen, but curiosity made her swipe once. Tessa. You're being so dramatic. All families have issues. There was no follow-up, no apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd taken. Just that final sentence, casually cruel. Marilyn blocked the number. The phone went still. She took out her checkbook, dusty, barely used in recent years, and filled out one final slip. Pay to the order of Molly J. Ford. Memo Freedom Fund, amount $11,000. Everything left from her personal reserve. She transferred the money to a new account in Molly's name, one she'd set up the week prior with Judith's help, locked with legal firewalls. Molly wouldn't be able to touch it until her 18th birthday, but when she did, it would come with a guidebook, handwritten, sectioned by lessons Marilyn wished she'd learned at that age. She placed the confirmation page inside her journal. Outside, the day had cooled slightly. A breeze rolled in across the cactus garden, stirring dust and fallen petals like lazy secrets. She stepped onto the lodge's shared deck, mug of warm cider in hand. The ceramic was thick, comforting. It smelled faintly of clove. Residents passed by in slow motion, walkers creaking, wheelchairs humming, but no one stopped. No one asked her name. It was a gift she hadn't known she needed: anonymity. She looked out across the grounds. There was no grand epiphany, no surge of pride, just stillness. She had wanted peace. What she had now was something harder, but better: distance. She took a sip of the cider, closed her eyes, then the mail carrier rolled by with the day's post. One small stack for her, secured with a paperclip. On top, a postcard front. A sun-bleached photo of the motel's sign, edges curled, colors faded. Back scrawled in scratchy black ink: "No one's asked for you since, just saying. E.H." She held the card for a long moment, then set it in the sun to dry out from the condensation of her mug. The auditorium wasn't large. Maybe 50 students, most in hoodies, laptops open on their knees, half listening until the woman in the slate-gray blazer stepped up to the mic. Marilyn stood still for a moment, scanning the crowd. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't fidget. She simply began. "I'm not here to tell you about money. I'm here to tell you about how long it takes to realize you're the collateral." Silence. She rested her hands lightly on the podium, her journal closed in front of her. No notes, no script. "I gave, quietly, because I was raised to believe that family meant always saying yes, and by the time I started saying no, I had already disappeared on paper, in photos, in holiday plans." A few students looked up from their screens. "I paid the mortgage, the car note, the summer camp. I gave them a ladder, and they called it a floor. Then they painted over the steps." No one moved. Even the clicking keyboards had gone still. And when I finally pulled back, I wasn't met with gratitude or concern. I was told I was selfish, that I must be losing my mind. A sharp inhale came from somewhere in the middle row. Marilyn let the silence stretch before continuing. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was recovering it. She paused, then gave a slow, brief smile. Just enough. I don't share this out of anger. I share this so you understand. Financial abuse doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes gift-wrapped in expectations and shouldn'ts. At the back of the room, Judith sat with a legal pad balanced on her knee. She didn't take notes, just watched, her jaw set in quiet pride. In the front row, Molly held her phone upright, recording. Her eyes didn't blink once. When the talk ended, the applause was soft at first, then growing. Not polite, grateful. A line formed quickly. Students, some wide-eyed, some red-eyed, all holding phones or notebooks. Some just stood and said thank you. Others whispered things they'd never said aloud. My grandma went through something like that. My aunt's name is still on her son's business. She thinks it doesn't matter. My mom co-signed 3 loans she never saw again. Marilyn didn't hug them. She didn't need to. She looked them all in the eye and said, "You're not alone. You're just early." One student, a quiet girl with sleeve tattoos and bitten nails, stepped forward last. She didn't ask a question, just said, "Do you think they knew they were doing it?" Marilyn's answer came with no hesitation. They knew just enough to hide it. The student nodded once, then walked off. After the crowd thinned, a young woman in a navy blazer approached, name tag pinned to her collar. "Ms. Grafton, I'm a social work grad student. I help train frontline caseworkers. Would you allow us to use your story in a training module?" Marilyn tilted her head. "Only if you include the ending I haven't written yet." The woman blinked, confused. "I'm sorry? Most people only like stories when the arc is tidy." Marilyn said, "But mine's still unfolding. That's the part they need to learn." The woman nodded slowly. "Understood." Across the room, Molly packed up the tripod and phone, her movements careful. When Marilyn approached, she smiled and held out the phone. "Captured every word," she said. "Already editing it for upload. You want to pick the title?" Marilyn glanced down at the screen. A paused frame showed her at the podium, shoulders squared, mouth mid-sentence. She tapped the screen and typed, "The story they thought I'd never tell." The teacups didn't match. One was porcelain, with blue forget-me-nots, the other chipped stoneware from a roadside antique mall. But Marilyn liked the way they looked side by side, imperfect, but equal. She poured the tea slowly. Molly sat across from her, a yellow legal pad balanced on her knee. "They keep coming," Molly said, tapping the pad. "Most are college-aged, a few are single moms. One girl's application was just a sticky note that said, 'Please, anything.'" Marilyn stirred honey into her cup. "That one's getting a call." Molly grinned, her eyes flashing with something hopeful. The living room was modest, a one-bedroom rental tucked behind a community garden on the edge of Flagstaff. Marilyn had moved in just weeks ago, quietly, no forwarding address except Judith and the post office. There were no family photos on the shelves, no heirloom china. Just clean lines, warm blankets, and a long table stacked with documents. She reached over and flipped through the glossy binder marked the Molly J. Ford Independence Fund. Terms of release. Inside were clauses, iron-tight ones, legal knots only she and Judith could untie. No parental proxy, no fund reassignment, no early withdrawal without documented exit from household control. Each section had been reviewed 3 times. "They'll try," Marilyn said. "Not just yours, any of their parents. They'll say it's not safe, that they know better, that the girls will waste it." Molly nodded slowly. "But they won't. They might," Marilyn said. "But they'll do it on their own terms. That's what matters." On the kitchen counter, a small ceramic jar labeled "office hours" held pens, post-its, and 2 unused burner phones. She now consulted part-time elder estate exit plans. Women mostly, some barely older than her children, some hiding documents inside cereal boxes, some smuggling themselves out of second homes with annuities in their coat pockets. No advertising, no websites, just word of mouth whispered names, a network of women fed up with erasure. Judith had helped her draft the liability waivers, the ethics statements. A new P.O. box handled the rest. Most of the women who call, Marilyn said, don't want revenge, they want room. Molly looked up. Is that what you wanted? Marilyn exhaled. I didn't know I was allowed to want anything. They sat in companionable quiet for a moment. Then the doorbell rang, 2 short chimes, then silence. Molly stood to answer it while Marilyn sipped her tea. A courier handed off a flat, carefully wrapped parcel with a return address from a small press in Vermont. Molly brought it over and laid it on the table. Marilyn unwrapped the paper slowly. Inside 3 copies of her memoir. Matte black cover. Cream pages. Title: How I Paid for My Own Erasure. Author M.R. Grafton. The dedication page read simply, for the ones who were never asked if they wanted out. She ran her fingers over the cover once, then closed the book again. This time she said quietly, the money teaches something. The envelope came certified, marked with Caleb's name in oversized font, like a toddler scribbling ownership across a toy he never built. Marilyn read the lawsuit twice, then passed it across the table to Judith, who didn't even flinch. Breach of oral agreement, Judith muttered. Cute, he's going for emotional leverage disguised as unpaid debt. No contract, Marilyn said. Not even a thank you. Exactly, Judith replied, already scribbling across a notepad. This gets tossed before it hits the judge's inbox. And it did. Dismissed within 10 business days without prejudice, but also without teeth. Judith offered to counter-sue for harassment. Marilyn declined. She didn't need the final word. She had the last move. The next campaign came the way Tessa always operated. Sideways, with curated vulnerability and tone-deaf pity. A Facebook post surfaced on a community board. Sometimes we lose family in ways that aren't death, but it still feels like grief. Please be kind. Aging can confuse even the strongest hearts. Attached was a grainy photo of Marilyn from 2 years ago, smiling at a barbecue she'd funded but wasn't invited to stay for. The comments tried to rally, but too many people had already read Marilyn's story. Her video had crossed 200,000 views. Reposts with captions like, protect your worth before someone writes over it, and she didn't disappear, she withdrew sponsorship. Tessa deleted the post within hours. No follow-up, no explanation, just silence. The kind Marilyn had long since stopped fearing. 2 days later, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from Caleb's town. Inside 1 page. Typed. No greeting. No name. We should have handled things differently. I don't expect you to respond. I'm sorry. No signature. No stamp of sincerity. Just an echo. Marilyn read it once, then slid the letter into a manila folder at the bottom of her filing cabinet, labeled a cost of entitlement. She didn't reread it, didn't burn it either. She just filed it beside the mortgage receipts, the wire transfer logs, and the revoked trust agreement, a paper graveyard for things she'd outlived. That night, Molly came over with takeout and a thin black frame wrapped in brown craft paper. No occasion, Molly said. Just felt right. Inside, a photo. Just the 2 of them. Taken on the porch last week. Marilyn in her soft gray cardigan. Molly's head tipped toward her shoulder, their smiles quiet but sure. No one else. Marilyn stared at it for a long moment, then placed it on the shelf where the family portraits used to be. Later, after Molly left, she pulled out a final document, a tattered original from the family trust, the one that still bore all their names in embossed lettering, their initials stacked like scaffolding on a house that only ever had one real architect. She stepped out onto the patio behind her cottage, a breeze flicking the corners of the paper like it was itching to disappear. She lit the match herself, not in anger, not even in ceremony, just necessity. The flame took slow at first, then faster. She watched as the letters warped, the ink curled, the names dissolved one by one. Caleb, Tessa, even her own. The paper collapsed in on itself like it finally understood what it had never protected. When it was over, she tapped the ashes into a clay bowl and walked back inside. The house sat tucked beneath a canopy of sycamores, its blue trim faded but proud, the porch wide enough for quiet conversations and coffee cups with stories. It wasn't big, just a two-bedroom craftsman overlooking a modest lake that rarely saw boats, but the air smelled like pine, and the silence had no expectations tied to it. Marilyn unpacked slowly, not because she was tired, but because she could. No deadlines, no itinerary. In the corner of the living room, a box labeled Reading Room, Final sat waiting. Inside, her memoir copies, resource guides, handwritten notes on estate exits, printouts from women's shelters, a spare recorder. She'd built a room first before the kitchen had a full set of plates, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, two armchairs, a single stained glass lamp with amber light, the spine of the home, not its ornament. Midway through shelving, she heard the familiar creak of tires on gravel. Ed stood in her front yard with a helmet dangling from one hand and a travel mug in the other. His bike leaned against the split-rail fence like it had always belonged there. "You get lost?" she asked, stepping onto the porch. "Wasn't far," he said. "Just figured I'd give you a few chapters before turning the page. You always this poetic, or is it the altitude?" He smiled. "You're not easy to stay away from, Marilyn." She nodded once, then motioned toward the second porch chair. He stayed an hour, didn't ask questions, didn't try to fix anything. When he left, she handed him a copy of the memoir, dog-eared and already annotated with yellow tabs. "I think some of your neighbors might need it more than mine ever did," she said. "I'll make sure it makes the rounds." Back inside, she found Molly in the reading room, tangled in headphone wires and laughing into her phone. "We're starting now," Molly said. "No more waiting for the perfect mic. We've got stories. That's enough." Marilyn looked down at the desk. The podcast kit Molly had pieced together sat ready, two mics, a laptop, a basic editing interface, and a logo scribbled in Sharpie on the whiteboard behind them. Title: No More Automatic Payments. Episode 1, The Motel Wasn't the End, It Was the Door. Marilyn slid into the chair opposite her. "You sure people want to hear me talk again?" "They already are," Molly said. "They just don't know it's you yet." She hit record. The red light blinked. Marilyn took a breath, not shaky, not shallow, just hers. She leaned into the mic. "Sometimes silence isn't escape. Sometimes it's punctuation." Molly smiled, giving her a thumbs up behind the screen. Marilyn continued. "I used to think if I explained myself well enough, someone would listen. Then I realized sometimes silence is the loudest exit." She paused. "Let the words settle," then closed the session with a quiet thank you. Molly hit stop. The file saved. The world shifted. That night, Marilyn stood by the lake with a mug of cider and listened to the wind move through the reeds. No phones, no calls, just night air and a horizon that didn't ask who she used to be. The ceremony wasn't glamorous. No velvet rope, no champagne flutes or gala gowns. Just a repurposed library auditorium and a podium borrowed from the local high school. Folding chairs, paper programs, and someone's uncle playing cello in the corner. But it was full. 83 guests, more watching on a live stream. And when Marilyn's name was called, for courage in dismantling quiet financial abuse, and for building paths no one else would pave, the entire room rose. No pre-roll, no speechwriter, just her, stepping up in a dark green jacket and low heels that didn't apologize for comfort. She unfolded a note from her pocket, not shaking, just steady. "To anyone who was ever told they were too much, too sensitive, too independent, too complicated for asking for simple kindness, you weren't too much, they were too little." A breath rippled through the audience like a page turning. She looked out across the room, not searching for approval, just taking inventory of who had stayed. "They told me my loyalty should be unconditional. So was my financing. Funny how one is questioned more than the other." A few quiet laughs, some nods. No one looked away. She ended the speech with a line not written on the card. I didn't escape, I exited, with the receipts. Then she stepped back from the mic. The ovation came like weather, slow building, then full. She didn't wave, just gave a small nod and returned to her seat beside Molly, who had filmed every word. That evening, back in the reading room, the house smelled faintly of pine and printer paper. Marilyn reached into the cabinet beneath the shelf and pulled out her old leather ledger, once filled with account balances, grant requests, repayment dates, now nearly empty. She flipped to the final page. One blank line. Pulled out her red stamp pad, inked the block, and pressed it into the page. Closed. Then she stood, walked to the porch, and sank into the wooden rocking chair that Ed had delivered last week, unwrapped and pre-sanded. In her hand, a warm mug of cider, cinnamon floating near the rim. Across from her, Molly curled up on the porch swing, sketch pad on her knees. The sunset didn't try to impress them, it just was lavender bleeding into rust, then deep gold sliding over the lake like an earned peace. Molly looked up. So what now? Marilyn took a sip. Let it settle before answering. Whatever I want, she said. On my dime. They sat there, the silence rich with nothing left to fix. No signatures needed. No corrections pending. Just light, receding slowly. A breeze rolled off the lake, soft enough to stir the pages of the open memoir on the table beside her. She watched it flutter once, then close itself gently, and then final line, they booked the trip without me. I booked the future without them.